I know in the last video I said we're done with variants of tanks, and we are, but these next three tanks might look familiar, and there's a reason for that. While the creature was a tank that hadn't existed before, despite being a panther with a bombarder's gun, these next three tanks might make you think they're just more variants, as they're seemingly skin versions of tanks. But I can assure you that these tanks are their own tanks, and you'll see what I mean when we get to the next two much more clearly, but today is the Death Chariot's day. This Tier 8 Chinese premium heavy tank may look like the 112, and it is the 112, but it's not the 112. Basically, it uses the model of the 112, but changes this tank enough to where I feel like it's not the 112. The next two tanks will do this better, with even changing their model tanks to a different class, but this one does it in a unique way too, I would think. While the 112 is a pref tank, this one is not. And that may seem like a bad thing, but that's why I say it's different enough, because they made some changes to the tank to make up for it. As usual, we begin with the gun, and well, in game it's just called the Reaper's Scythe, and no, I'm not talking about the Warhammer tank, but because we know it's a 112 model, we can infer that the caliber is a 122mm. A 122mm that hits for 460 alpha damage. This is one of the only two Tier 8 heavy tanks with this alpha damage, with the other being the Skoda T56, which automatically means this tank has tough competition for that alpha damage, because the T56 is one beast of a tank. The Death Chariot reloads every 15 seconds base, and this gives it a pretty average 1840 DPM. For its alpha, this is actually pretty nice, since it could have been much lower, like those of the 490 and 360 alpha guns that get shafted in their DPM. This one is at least average. Unfortunately, despite fighting tier 10s now, it's got a pretty low standard pen for a non-pref tank, with 208mm of standard AP penetration and 800 shell speed, and then its premium heat rounds only have 250mm of pen with 640 shell speed. This is the same as its Model 112 for its heat rounds, which again is a pref tank, and a bit odd, but it's still heat at least, and not low pen AP like the Skoda actually has. The frustrating bit of this tank isn't its ammo though, it's its gun handling. It has a pretty bad .42 base accuracy, and this is only made worse with its 3 whole seconds of aim time. It's a gun that honestly feels stuck in the past for me, whereas many guns nowadays feel extremely nice and easy to use. This one felt super annoying with the long aim time and bad snapshotting capabilities. It's one of the few tanks I run vert stabs on because of it. And as if it couldn't get any worse, it only has 6 degrees of gun depression. It's at least not 5, but 6 to me is in a weird spot. 5 is just bad, right? 7 is good bad. 8 is good, and 10 is great. 6 is in between that bad and good bad, by being frustratingly not enough to be good bad. I hope that makes sense. When using tanks with 5, you know how bad it is in many spots, so you play around that. With 7 degrees, it opens up a bit more for you and gives you that extra leeway. But with 6, it feels like a tease for 7 degrees. Anyway, the gun could be hit or miss, more so than other tanks. And while the Skoda has the same accuracy and aim time with its 2-shot autoloader, it can choose to have better accuracy with its single shot instead, and actually has 8 degrees of gun depression, which we categorize as good. Does its armor hold up though? Well, firstly, its 1500 HP is nothing special and very average, so it's not getting help in that department. It is a Chinese tank, which most people write off as Russian knockoffs. Its armor layout is like that of the 113 though, rather than the pike noses of the 110 and IS-3s. Now, would you believe it if I told you the armor is the exact same as that 112 though? Well, you should, because it is. Both have a 120mm upper plate and a 140mm lower plate. Both have the same turret cheeks and mantlet and everything. It's kind of upsetting, but at the same time, the armor was good to begin with. The upper plate is well angled, and the extra thickness of the lower plate helps that area, especially when angled. Side scraping is good with 100mm of side armor with 20mm tracks, and the hull does hang over the side of the tank a bit, but it has this 30mm spaced armor cavity on the lower half of the side. This can catch heat rounds that may have gone high up on the tracks, and the corner on the inside is 230mm that they have to pen after going through the spaced armor. This is great for side scraping, but because that inside corner is a cut corner, it becomes flat towards your opponent when you side scrape, and if they have enough pen, they can go through that portion of the armor because of it. The turret does have 150mm cupolas to worry about, but luckily they're far enough back and low enough that if you do get to use your gun depression to its fullest, they become difficult to hit at the very least. The turret face can be penned with high enough pen, and the mantlet does have armor behind it around the edges, so hitting closer to the gun on the left side or off of the mantlet on the right side are the spots where people mostly pen you. But the turret is quite reliable for the most part. Of course, getting shot at is never the first choice, and speed is everything when it comes to poking around corners. I know I said this tank is different enough with the gun alone and with no pref versus the 112, but it's also different in a bad way with its speed, getting cut down from 45 to 35 kilometers an hour forward. Oddly enough though, the engine is the same with 580 horsepower for a power to weight ratio of 12.61, which for a heavy tank is decent power. But why 35? Why the drop? I don't know. Even the track traverse speed dropped by 2 to 24 degrees a second. It is decent mobility at least. It's more than enough horsepower to cap out that top speed on flats too, and it'll leave you wishing you hadn't been limited in that top speed quite often in today's quick game simulator. At least its spotting capabilities weren't made worse too. It is still the exact same with 380 meters view range, which is average for its tier, with concealment values you'd expect from a heavy tank as well. It's nothing special in this department for sure, but it's a heavy tank. What did you expect? So although I may have said this isn't a variant of a tank like previous tanks, you can argue that it actually is, with its only differences being its alpha damage, standard pen, reload time, and gun handling, and even worse speeds actually. You can't say that this is just a variant of the 112. But to me, alpha changes to tanks are massive when it comes to differentiating tanks. Other than the armor model and model itself, the biggest thing to me is gun caliber and damage. And when it comes to that caliber, I only assumed it's a 122mm since it's the same as the 112. But it could be coded as a 130mm since it's 460 alpha damage, and the only other tank with that alpha is also a 130mm. For that, we would have to ask Wargaming to confirm what caliber it is. But even if it is the same caliber, which it may not be, it's a different alpha damage. Plus, the tank is no longer pref, meaning you're going to suffer more in this tank than you would a 112. Which I get doesn't try and sell this tank very well, but I think the damage and loss of pref is enough to classify it as its own tank and not a variant. Regardless though of whether we classify it as a variant or not, it's a pretty mid tank in my opinion. If I want to hit hard enough, I have other options with 440 alpha damage guns or even 490s, or even the only other 460. I wouldn't say this competes very well with high alpha tanks, but it's not terrible either. I at least enjoyed playing it for the most part. And of course, it can participate in an annual event mode if standard play isn't enough for you. And when it awakens in that mode, it gets basically ATGMs and rockets, but rockets with a twist. So yeah, its ability is missiles, but as a secondary weapon, so you can still use your regular gun in combat. There are two types of missiles, or skulls in the Death Chariot's case, to load. The first being a 5-round clip of ATGMs that deal low damage. These have to be guided to their target to hit, like an ATGM. But the second skull ammo to load is one big, high damage rocket that seeks out the target for you, no guiding necessary. This sounds neat, but it's pretty slow, so if the enemy has cover close by, they can make the skull blow up preemptively before reaching them. Honestly, it was novel at the time, but it's a pretty forgettable tank in the Awaken mode if you ask me. It's nothing special or crazy, and ultimately it's not too powerful either in my opinion. There's so many tanks to choose from in the mode, and this one doesn't stand out to me. It's available in this year's Monster Hunter op, but I'd say it's middle of the road in priority. It's not top 3, but it's not bottom 3 either. And that's also because of its standard play. I'm sure some people will like this tank, and I did too to an extent, but with what it is, either considered a variant or not, you'd be better playing off the 112 for the same armor profile with higher speeds, pref matchmaking, and the same premium pen. Or better off playing the Skoda T56 with single or double shot guns for the same damage and better gun depression. At least, that's how I'm looking at it. It doesn't have a redeeming feature that makes it stand out by itself, other than being an Awaken mode tank. Anyway, before we get into the gameplay, let's go over the loadout. We're running vert stabs, rammer, and vents. No optics because we need vert stabs, so we're relying on our commander alone to boost that view range with vents. running with a premium repair kit, food rations, and a standard med kit for our consumables. And our commander has 6th Sense, rapid loading, steady aim, run and gun, situational awareness, born leader, snapshot, supply conservation, and off-road driving. And here we are on the only game for today's review on Steps. And I'm starting it a little bit earlier than I usually do with the 10-second timer at the beginning because I need to show off the scoreboard or the leaderboard or the roster, sorry. Wrong words. And that's because I actually don't show off the scoreboard leaderboard at the end. And I can only presume that's because when I got this game, I was thinking, this isn't the one I'm going to use. I'm going to get a better one. And I ended up not doing that. So here we are with what I thought wouldn't be the one I was going to use because I thought I would get a better game. Off the rip though, you can see us being topped out on our speed. There we are at 35 on a flat. We have enough horsepower. You can hear like the tank wants to go faster, right? But it's not. Again, I hope I got my point across. I think it is different enough, but it's also like not different in a valuable way to where it warrants losing ref. And I don't have the 112. It's a tank that I've always wanted. But after playing this tank and seeing the stat differences between the 112, I wouldn't mind dealing 390 alpha damage if it meant I had 45 speed and never saw a tier 10 with the same armor, right? Right? You still have 250 premium heat on that thing too, and you can make use of the 193 standard pen, or whatever 190 something it is. Anyway, I've gone over that plenty, but in this game, it is skew spawn steps, which is something that I am very annoyed about that's still in the game. And I could make a whole video on this alone about skew spawns in the game that were implemented because there were less maps in the game. So they did this to create quote-unquote diversity, and a lot of the maps just don't work. And here, we don't get really the brawl that we should on a steps game. Instead, we came over here and now we're fighting on like fallback positions immediately. And because of that, we're just kind of sitting on this rock waiting to see if the enemy's going to come out. My team's going to push in. If they push in, I'll start driving over there. But we're just playing peekaboo with this unskinned icebreaker. And the ISM decides to put his whole foot out and give it to me, so we took it. Unfortunately, you can see what happens most of the time in this map. The enemy team has most of their heavy tanks over here, while I had 2 or 3 tanks come with me, and that's about it. And so it's kind of looking like a rough start, but we already have almost 2,000 damage. But you can see we're gonna lose this quite quickly, or so you would think. Oh, there we are above the 2k damage mark. We've taken no damage except for 10 splash. Now you can see here that I decide now's my opportunity to run if I ever use it, right? My last tank died. It's time to move away. Maybe these guys will snipe, artillery will hit, something will stop these guys. I've done as much as I could there, and now it's time to leave. But I know I can't cross the train tracks, so this mound I'm looking at, I'm going to use as enough cover, because thankfully I'm sort of a low profile tank. Mounds like this I can utilize to hide most of my tank if they come over that ridge. I'm also spotting for my team if they decide to ever shoot over here, if they have shots, that is. So skewed spawn steps. Most of the enemy team will come over here, they win the brawl, and then they kind of have to just wait to see how they're going to push out and whether or not they won the south so that they can pinch us in the spawn, right? But it's 9-9. Our team actually did win on the other side, or at least they're slowly winning. And we do put a shot into someone and leaving them on 2 HP. This VK finally pokes and hits me. He hit me for his Alpha exactly, by the way. We were at 1490 just a minute ago, and now we're at 1000. So, sorry, it's not even a VK. It is an icebreaker. My bad. It is the skin tank. But we're just waiting. I mean, with Excuse My Steps, this is... I either die in that brawl, or I, die running away from the brawl, or I never go to the brawl in the first place. But I'm not sniping with .42 base accuracy. I'm not doing that. I'm definitely not doing that, especially with 3 seconds aim time. Acquiring new targets from more than 30 degrees to rotation is... Oh. Anyway. We're just waiting. That's what we're doing this game. We're just waiting. And it's 8-8, so, like, it's close on both sides. So, if it was, like, 12-8 at this point, and we were having most of my team rush the south, I would have made some more pressure a lot sooner. Right? But I am going to start making pressure now, because I think I realize the enemy team doesn't want to poke this. And you can see that the icebreaker decides he's going to sit in a waiting position. There is a rock here that, like, I can sort of use to cover me when I try and jump over. But I'm not sure what I want to do. He has 490 alpha damage. He can 2-shot me if he high rolls. I have to 3-shot him. So we're just looking for opportunities. I mean, this isn't really a tank that I want to go rushing at people with. That VK's got great armor too. And having to hit his upper or lower plate is pretty rough. I do decide to finally try and push over. He misses his shot completely. We put one into his side. So now we're above 3,000 damage. He's a 2-shot. I'm also, though, a relative 2-shot if he high rolls. He's going to give us his side. We put one into his ammo rack in the back with a heat round because he over-angled. He does pen us, though. But because he's ammo rack, and because he's a higher alpha, he's got a 17.5-second reload. We reload first, but I bounced his turret cheek with the 250 millimeters of heat pen. Him pointing his gun in the air didn't even matter. He gets artillery, though. From our Artie, who's on the other side of the map completely. That puts us at 3,700 damage. We're now winning 7-5, and now it looks like I'm going to be chasing for the rest of the game, right? Although it's now 6-5, so hopefully the enemy team starts to hold out a little bit more. But I only have 558 hit points to play with. So it's not guaranteed that I get to do much more. It's now 5-5, so that advantage in that rush we were starting to put pressure with, starting to look a little bit less effective. But they do have a 2 HP Patriot. So... and now they don't. We know artillery's over here. We don't know what else is over here. I don't know where the other 3 tanks are. 2 of them are in a platoon. So I do have to be worried about a coordinated push. I go for the aggressive shot on the artillery. He doesn't snap one into me. We high roll for 499, almost hitting for 500. I don't want to take the risky shot. You know, if he hits me for enough damage to put me into a one-shot for other tanks, that's not a good idea, right? They do have a Senjutsu, which actually is kind of scary because the flamethrowers in this game, the way they work, right, is they don't have to hit your armor whatsoever. He could hit like the drive wheel of my tank and start putting fire ticks on me. But it doesn't matter because he's dead. We're at 4,600 damage. Artillery misses. We're at 4,700 damage. There's one tank left alive. He's targeting us. I quickly checked the leaderboard. I didn't see it there when watching it back, but I must have seen it in game to see, can I take a hit from this tank destroyer? It takes me a second to realize he's to my left though, and I definitely can take a hit from this tank destroyer. I can take 2 even, because he is a Panzerjäger. Very OP tank though. This is a review that was taken before the season that we are in currently, so Panzerjäger was not a stage 75 reward. I'm hoping to reload here before he gets away, but he gets away just in time, and with our tank destroyer to my left being an ISU 152K, we don't get any more of that damage. So you could probably see why I thought I'd get a better game, and that's because we only, well, I can't say we only did. 5,200 damage is pretty good, But we only got 1 kill and 1800 base XP, which gave us a first class. So, you know me, I would love to give you guys aces, and in the past few videos, we've had 2 games because we had a good game that wasn't an ace, and then we tried to get you an ace. But no ace for this one. So, that's it for the Death Chariot, though. Pretty mid-tank. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.